Hello, good evening. My name is Selwyn Thomas, and I represent Talent Lab Consulting. I know you would have had a very long day. You would have heard a lot of specialist experts talk. I'm not a specialist, but I come with a view to share the best practices overseas in terms of child's right, children's right. I've lived the last 30 years overseas. I'm New Zealand citizen, resident of Australia, and because of my work, I've worked in a number of countries and I've got very good exposure with the best practices. Okay, so, whatever that I say, Elami, you should take it in the context of a layperson's view and not as an expert. I've seen the list of people, those who shared before me, are yet to share, or doctors and very strong experts in these areas, but I'm not one such person. So I'll share with you very simple, and I'll keep this very brief and quick. And I know that by now you'll be very tired and you'll want to quickly leave. Okay, so I won't hold you. எவ்வளவு சீக்கிரம் முடிக்க முடியுமோ நான் அதை முடிக்க முயற்சிக்கிறேன். Okay, the pillars are the same. The child rights pillars are the same. Survival, development, protection, and participation. Globally, they are the same. But the difference between the best practices overseas and Sonale, you're talking about the developed nations against developing nations. That's how I look at it. Overseas in Solomon, the best practices in Solomon. So I think in the four pillars now, there is a difference in these two categories of nations. So the survival and development are more relevant for developing nations. The developed nations on the Western economies, it's more in the areas of protection and participation. So that is primary, that is where the difference lies. Best practices in Solomon. And also in a way like India or any other developing nation cannot automatically look at those Western nations. Our priorities are very different. So I want you to understand in the context, the best practices is not something that we can straight away take that and apply in an Indian context. Okay, so let me get on to the best practices. So New Zealand is ranked number 4 in one of the ratings when it comes to child rights, and India is rated 149. So by virtue of having been close to 30 years as a New Zealand citizen, I do understand to a reasonable extent the best practices. My children in Pulinga were brought up there and they've been to school, university, and they're now working. We know the entire journey, and I've understood and experienced as a parent the protection that they have. இப்போ நம்ம பேசிட்டு இருக்கோம் இந்தியாவில் பிள்ளைங்களை அடிக்கக்கூடாது எல்லாம் சொல்லிட்டு those things that were enshrined. You cannot in New Zealand. I'll give you an example. ஒரு 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 அப்பா அம்மா குழந்தைய அடிக்க முடியாது. They can. ஓரளவுக்கு சொன்னாங்க ஸ்பாங்க் பண்ணலாம் at the bottom. It's not going to hurt in the sense வலிக்கும். And there not be any injury in சொன்னப்போ கூட அது கூட is not possible. So you cannot harm a child in any way. Even if you were to scream, people will report. So it's very, very hard, and the children's rights are well protected. When we say that the rights, the child is not going to fight for the rights, the community is aware of the rights of the child. So that's just an example. New Zealand in particular, and you cannot spank. So teachers, own parents cannot. So kill முடியாது எல்லாமே பண்ண முடியாது. Just to give a very simple example now. But in terms of the 4 pillars, education is mandatory in New Zealand. That's a right of a child. So what it means that child for education வேணும்னு சொல்லி கேட்க முடியாது, but that's enshrined in the fact, I'll give another example. நாங்க இங்க one of our relatives வீட்டுக்கு நாங்க நியூசிலாந்து போனப்போ அங்க இருக்க அவங்க ரொம்ப எக்ஸைட் ஆனோடனே அவங்க வீட்டுல இருக்க பையன் 2 நாள் லீவ் போட்டான் உடம்பு சரியில்லைன்னு சொல்லிட்டு. 3ஆவது நாள் ஃபோன் பண்ணி லீவ் சொல்லலான்ற டைம்ல நான் உடம்பு சரியில்லை இன்னைக்கும் வரமாட்டான்னு சொல்லும் போது ஸ்கூல் சொன்னாங்க ஒன்றும் பிரச்சனை கிடையாது, நாங்க உங்க வீட்டுக்கு வரோம். So they immediately send someone to make sure we are not fooling or we are not bluffing. The child நாங்க mislead பண்ணலாம் or education deprive பண்ணலாம். So schools have got a responsibility in order to ensure the child's education does not suffer. ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி அதே மாதிரி ரோட்ல வந்து ஸ்கூல் டைம்ல பிள்ளைகள் யூனிஃபார்ம் ரோடு என்ன பார்த்தாங்கன்னா police will come and they'll catch hold of them, take them to school, talk to the school authorities and also to the parents. Now technology is available. இங்கே நான் பார்த்துருக்கேன் தமிழ்நாடுலாம் ஸ்கூலுக்கு அந்த டைம்ல பிள்ளைங்க வரணும்னா they will text the parents and they'll come to you later why it is working and it's not working. So education is something that's mandatory. That is, and India, I think we say in some states or most states is mandatory, but we do not enforce it for various reasons. But அங்க வந்து it's completely enforced. So அப்போ என்ன ஆகுதுன்னு சொன்னா give another example. ஸ்கூலுக்கு வரணும்னு சொன்ன பிறகு அந்த ஸ்கூல் பிள்ளைங்க போவாங்க. ஏன்னா கவர்மெண்ட் சேஸ் பேரண்ட் இஸ் நாட் வில்லிங் டு சென்ட் த சைல்ட் ஆர் they don't care அப்படின்னும் போது கவர்மெண்ட் சேஸ் யூ மஸ்ட் கம் பண்ணும் போது அப்போ அந்த பேரண்ட் அனுப்பிச்சு விட்டுருவாங்க. தேர் will not be any shoes for the child. காலையில சாப்பிட்டு இருக்காது. கேட்டா சொல்லுவாங்க நீங்க தானே சொன்னீங்க ஸ்கூலுக்கு அனுப்பிட்டோன்னு. So in enforcing or making education mandatory, then the government of the school has got the responsibility அந்த குழந்தைக்கு ஷூஸ் வாங்கி கொடுத்து சாப்பாடு போட்டு அது அதோட வெல்பீயிங் கேர் பண்ற அளவுக்கு that responsibility is also there. While we say it's mandatory, while there also recognize the fact that there are instances where the parent cannot afford to put the children in school. Again, education is free, but shoes, jacket, குளிருக்கு சாப்பாடு இந்த மாதிரி விஷயங்கள் அவங்களால கொடுக்க முடியாத போது mandatory சொல்றது மட்டும் இல்லாமல் they have a very good support system when it comes to education. So majority of the children then are in the environment of family or in the school. Schoolல பாத்தீங்கன்னா these children are made aware of their rights right from nursery இருந்து வரும்போதே there's a very good level of participation. Children are very aware of their rights. You know, எந்த அளவுக்குன்னா ஒரு now we are talking about middle school or high school அப்படி எடுத்துக்கிட்டீங்கன்னா if I see my classmates got some bruise or பல்லு உடைஞ்சிருக்குன்னா complain to the teachers. They can escalate to the teachers and say, பல்லு உடைஞ்சிருக்கு. அது இல்லைன்னா அவங்க பேசும்போது by sharing, the girl will not have slept the night or she is teary அழுதுன்னு இருக்கானா அது கூட அவங்க கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ணாங்கன்னா school will take and it will take cognizance of that and will report and they'll inquire and most often it will lead towards some kind of an abuse or harassment of the child. So இது வந்து எப்படின்னா the child, not the child who is the victim, the children around are what is happening and what needs to be done. And they're educated and made aware. But also we look into some of the unique issues that the children have when it comes to the rights of the children there. So there is a specific act in 2004, I think, New Zealand passed, which is called Care of Children Act. Okay, the Care of Children Act, what does it mean? It gives voice and participation for children in all matters related to children. So you cannot have a policy, you cannot do anything related to a child or children in general without getting them involved, asking them for the views, listening to them, and then only they will be able to take that. So the voice and participation is something which has been made essential through the Care of Children Act of 2004. But as I said, I'll now talk about the specific issues that relates to. We talked about children's right and so on. Rights is easy to understand, but it's what is more is like what are the challenges. Other then you'll know how the rights are handled. Children's rights. So discrimination is big. So when we say discrimination, India mari caste discrimination கிடையாது. But there are different nationalities and also especially New Zealand and Australia, or be it in America and other places around the so-called what do you call we call it pakeha, the white-skinned people have actually come and started live in a land that was traditionally owned and lived by the natives, local people here. So their development is not the same. They look different. The color is different, and their maturity levels in terms of intelligence also not the same. However, uh, there cannot be any discrimination with that. So that is something the children have been made aware that discrimination is not something that can be taken lightly and cannot be practiced. So that is a huge problem in terms of uniqueness of that. In India, we may have different forms of discrimination, but again, many of that we take it for granted, and that's very normal. But there, that's one of the things. And second, the factor is that the mental stress of those children there are very, very high. Unlike here, we have a kind of a social fabric that supports children earlier. Like we have parents to living together, or we've got grandparents, or we have extended families, we've got religious systems or a cultural mechanism that will support. Excuse me. But overseas level, that is not there. So, but there are broken families, nuclear families, and all of that. And alongside, you've got alcoholism, you have drug addiction in the family, and all of that, which means they don't care. They're all the time under influence of some kind of a psychotropic drug or an alcohol. So that impacts the child. So as a result, the mental stress is very high. So there is abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, and all forms of abuse is very prevalent among the societies there. And that is where I think the awareness of child rights makes a big, is a huge factor to be, socialize and people understand. The children in particular understand that. So the other one is that bullying. So while there is no discrimination, there should not be any discrimination. Bullying, I'm not saying in terms of race or color or religion. In general, bullying is something that can be done, and that is very prevalent again among schools. And we've had the children committing suicide, there have been violence, and school dropout or resorting to drugs because of bullying. So bullying is a problem, and then that's where one of the things that the child rights, by making it aware through the Care of Children Act and other agencies, they kind of sanitize these issues as prevalent, try to reach that. And then one other area where there's a massive difference compared to where we are here in India and especially countries like New Zealand is that family dispute resolution center. And it is a known fact that people turn and they and the broken families are very it has a huge impact on the child. That so what the family dispute resolution center does is that the child's view as well. Unlike in India, we try not to involve the child, and I think for the right reasons here, on the maturity levels, we expect the children not to get into the dispute side and who's good, who's bad, and all of that. But in a mature society and in an advanced society such as New Zealand and Australia and other places, the Family Dispute Resolution Center actually listens to the child. The father and the mother or the partners, and there is a dispute, there is anger, and they're now wanting to separate. The child is going to be impacted, and therefore there is a voice of the child. The mechanism ensures that they listen. In the dispute law, the child has actually got a voice. And I won't go much again. One other issue that where the child rights. This is yeah, this one is quite unique and it's quite tricky as well. The fact there is not a high level, but there is a significant number of teenage pregnancy while they're teenagers because of the mandatory education. They're in school and they are pregnant and they carry they go through the pregnancy, and some of these are young teenage mothers. And some of you may not be aware, but it's a fact that girls' schools in New Zealand have got breastfeeding facilities for young mothers, student mothers. So they're not chastised. They don't make sure the child does not drop out because of teenage pregnancy and all that. That he or she must continue to get educated because that's mandatory. Having said that, if in the event of she getting pregnant and goes to, if she became pregnant, then obviously the result is there. She may have a child, and school has to create a facility that the young teenage mother is able to care for the child. And also, there are voices now they saying it's just not the mother, the teenage father also needs to be listened. So, what this then leads to is the contraceptive education and all of that we heard. So over the difference that I'm trying to make is that the going back to the four the pillars of child rights, while we talk about survival and development. It is about the protection and the participation are very high and big, because the problem that I listed to you is are in those areas um, where the high level of awareness, high level of rights, the acts, and the schools and the religious system, the churches and whatever, and all of those systems are there in order to make people aware, in particular child to be aware. And lastly, one example that I'll give you and I'll share that shocked me 30 years ago was the fact that I walked into this is again not about any, don't get me wrong, walked into a church for the first time overseas, and then I saw there were huge stickers that were pasted in most places, like in the wash basin, the toilets, or prominent places like, if you see or if you find someone touch you inappropriately, please call this number. So what they mean, anyone, it also specifically and explicitly they put the priest. So even under the religious leader, if they touch, and you have a right to complain, and the number was there, and it was mandatory for the church to put that as a display. So those are the things that again, Sunday schools, Santa Claus. Santa Claus is a licensed job overseas because they handle children, and then they would take the child and make it sit on the lap to take some photos. So you can't put a Santa Claus just because he's got a white beard and he looks cheerful and chubby. It is essential for those that they put a Santa Claus in a shopping mall or a school or any other place. They need to get the police verified of that particular person. That in essence is what I wanted to share. But again, purely from a layman's perspective, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in this area, so I'm not able to give you very critical or fundamental or educated view about this. Mine is purely a layman's view of someone who's lived overseas, witnessed, experienced, and I've seen things that relate to child rights. Again, thank you for the time, and hope you find this useful. And thanks, Victor, for giving me the opportunity to share. And wish you all a great evening.